Hi folks, I have a question for you today, and I'm out without my camera, so I feel quite naked. I'm just out basically looking at this. It's just a small mound in a wood. Never been here before, so I thought I'd come out, have a wander around for half an hour and just have a quick chat. So yeah, I've got a question for you this week, and it was going to be all wrapped up in one video, but I jumped in the rabbit hole and down I went. It got very deep very fast. And what I've decided to do is break this down into 3 chunks. And over the next 3 weeks, I'll ask one question each week, or each Thursday anyway. Hopefully I can do it in the next 3 consecutive weeks. I've got some friends with me. The birds tend to only make a noise when I speak. It's quite funny really. I think they're moving on. Buzz off. Let me first just try and explain where this came from, give you a bit of background. It all started out on Instagram. I use Instagram quite a lot, and a bit too much perhaps. I'm a frequent flyer. And in this last few months, what I've been doing is adding photography accounts, photographers, mostly landscape photographers, but some street photographers and creative photographers. So without realising, what happened is I started to play a bit of a game with it, and I was checking out the bio pages of these photographers, the tiled screen where you've got sort of the most recent images, and I'd just casually in the background start a bit of a game with myself, and I was asking if I could tell which camera system they shot. Were they a Fuji shooter, a Nikon shooter, a Canon shooter, or whatever. Some photographers will share that information in their bio, others will tag their gear in their images, and for those that did, what shocked me somewhat is that 8-9 times out of 10 I was predicting right, and then a wave of concern swept over me. I started to wonder why that was. How can that be? I mean, it didn't make any sense. How could I tell which camera ecosystem a certain photographer shot in? What was it about those 9 images that gave it away? And that sent me down this rabbit hole, and that's what's put a spark underneath these 3 questions. I asked myself, what are we dealing with here? You know, is this a camera manufacturer shadow? Is it something that we have to accept? It's not, because for shooters that I couldn't tell, I had no perception of what camera system they shot in. They shoot above it. They go beyond that. They use their equipment differently. They shoot differently. They process differently. They do something differently. It elevates their work beyond this vibe that I was recognising in some photographers' feeds. And it made me ask, you know, are we perhaps being dragged into a void, a manufacturer's void? Like if we pick up a Fuji camera and that becomes our primary shooter, is that forcing us into the Fuji vibe? Or do we have to accept our work is going to have that Fuji essence, that Fuji style? The same for any other manufacturer. It's not just Fuji, it's all manufacturers. Are we being dragged along? Or is there more to it? Is there something else there? My fear, I suppose, is that when I look at how many feeds I've come across, I'm talking hundreds here, I'm not talking 1 or 2. Shut up, you naughty birds. Clear off. I'm going to go and chase them off. So, yeah, I'm talking hundreds of photographers, and I'm talking tens upon tens of accounts that I've tried to predict. See, as soon as I move, they go quiet. It's prolific. It's not an isolated few, it's common. That's the point. And the fear I had was that when we adopt a camera system or a device type for shooting, that we somehow become shackled by it, somehow labelled with it, somehow restricted by it. And I don't see that talked about. I don't see that questioned. And really that's what I'm doing. I'm asking the question today, that's all. I'm just raising the question. Okay, so the first question of 3 over 3 weeks. How well do you know your camera? And I'm not talking about technically, and I'm not talking about physically or practically. I'm talking creatively. How well do you know your camera creatively? Have you ever pushed your camera to its limits? Have you ever actively taken your camera and pushed it to its limits? Then gone a step beyond there just to see what it does. And then gone a step beyond that because you can, because it'll allow it. Have you ever explored the range of creativity your camera offers you? Or is it a tool to capture data, take images? How much have you explored your camera's ability to exploit light? How much dynamic range does it really have? Forget the technical specs, forget the menu system, forget what the reviewers say. Have you tried it for yourself with your camera, your chosen tool? I haven't. Why would I? Should I? Will it help me understand my tool better? And that, I'm starting to believe personally, would definitely help me. It'll help me connect to my photography better. Forget the camera I shoot, think about the light I'm playing with. Let me just show you that for a split second. Look at this. We've had storms for the last 2 days, torrential rain, blustery winds, and yet we've still got a beautiful canopy. Klingons. It's great. Do you know what your camera can do? That's the question. Do you know what your camera can do? Practically. Have you tested it? Why haven't you? Does it have an impact on your photography? By not understanding your equipment that well, that intimately, do you end up with a feed of images that have the vibe? Can your viewers predict you're a Sony shooter, an Olympus shooter, a Fuji shooter, a Nikon shooter, Canon shooter? Have you ever thought about it? Has it ever crossed your mind? Here's another one. Has your shooting been influenced by your camera? Its design, the way the menus are structured, the ergonomics of it, the buttons on the back, the layout of the controls. As an example, if you've got an ISO button as a back button on your camera body, is it something that you change frequently? Is it a go-to setting for you? Are your images usually clear of noise and light well balanced? But you don't adjust your white balance manually because it's hidden in the menus and it's a bit too much of a pain in the bitch. Pain in the arse. Too difficult. Does your camera influence the way you shoot? Do you accept certain settings because they are too difficult to reach? Does that influence your results, your photography, your images? Does it play a part in a feed that is predictable, that you can tell is a Canon feed or a Fuji feed or a Sony feed? It's worthwhile me saying this is something that doesn't just affect mirrorless shooters or DSLR shooters. I recognise this across the board. You know, you can tell a mobile shot sometimes. You can tell film because it's a media difference. It's not a digital capture, it's a very different vibe. I guess this should be restricted to digital media, but across all formats, mobile, compact, bridge, DSLR mirrorless, you name it. I'm seeing this pattern of manufacturer, this vibe. Sometimes I come across a feed, I haven't got a clue. I couldn't tell you what make a camera shot those images. It's so inspired, so creative. The term I've coined is that they shoot above it. They shoot above it, compose above it, process above it. And they don't carry a manufacturer's vibe in their work. Their work is above it. The masses, I mean, we get so saturated in these images. There's so much of it. No wonder we can see patterns, no wonder we can see trends. But what makes them? What influences it? And the ultimate question boils down to me asking you, I suppose, are you happy, or would you be happy to think that your viewers could identify your feed by your camera manufacturer, the name stamped on the front of your body? Do you look like a Minolta shooter? Do you look like an Olympus man? Do you look like a Nikon lady? Do you look like a Sony boy? Because the pattern's there. I've proven to myself I can isolate it, and I'm no genius, you know. I mean, if I can, I'm sure you can. And check it out sometime. Have a look, test it, see what I'm saying. Have a look down on the Instagram feed, look at the bios and check out those 9 images. Guess what cameras they use. See how many you get right. You might be shocked as I was, and that might eventually lead to some concern about what's going on here. How is it bothering me? Am I being influenced without realising it? Are you being influenced without realising it? And that's one of the points to this, certainly this first question. Is it happening subversively? Do we not recognise what's going on? Are we just lemmings following the trend? Because it looks that way. Man, it looks that way. And that bothers me. It really bothers me. Are we at risk of losing our individuality? Do you feel oppressed in some way without being able to identify it? I do. I feel as if I'm pressured into capturing shots of a certain aesthetic, but I don't know where that pressure comes from. I just feel it in my core. And it affects me. It affects my results. I'm not as satisfied as I used to be when I shot film, not by a country mile, not by a long chalk. And yes, I love film, but I also love digital. So it's not that. It's not the change in media. Social media's got a part to play in this, and that's something we'll come to later. But today, I just want to keep it on this point. I just want to boil it down to this one question for you. And it's the same question I'm asking myself, and I'm trying to come up with my own answers, as I hope some of you will. I hope you'll think about this. If you're interested, you know, you may be satisfied with your shooting and have no qualms about it, and that's great, absolutely fantastic. But if, like me, you feel, I suppose, stifled in some way or creatively hemmed in, then maybe this is a good place to start. I hope it is. I hope it helps someone. I sincerely do. That is today's question. How well do you know your camera in isolation? How well do you know your camera creatively? Have you ever tried to push it? Have you ever explored white balance, really played with white balance, for instance? You know, I bet most people haven't. Why not? Is it because it's so easy to adjust in post-processing? Let me ask this question. I only just come up with this one. What happens if post-processing doesn't adjust white balance the same way as it does if you adjust white balance on camera? Have you ever tested that? Would your results have that essential difference? Another question. I've only just come up with this one as well, so forgive me. But have you ever played, or do you ever tinker with colour calibration settings at the bottom of the Lightroom list of options? Do you ever tweak your blue slider? Do you ever dumb it down and lift the saturation slightly? Why not? I mean, that's something I do, but it's only something I've recently adopted. I haven't done it before. I've only recently started to play with colour calibration. But I think I see a difference in my results, whether that's enough to turn me into one of those who shoots above it, or just a different version of myself. I don't know. It's not my ultimate goal to rise above this. It's just a consideration. So that's it for today. That's today's question. That's the start of this 3-chunk, 3-day, 3-question series in which we'll take a closer look at modern photography, our place in that world, and where our results stand, what influences them. I'm not going to go on any further. I've not covered some of the ground I wanted to, but as I'm out here in this beautiful place, it occurs to me some of those thoughts are perhaps my own and not as valuable to anyone else. And that's an important point for me to say. I think this is subjective. I'm not trying to lead anybody anywhere or come up with some radical thoughts on how to process your images differently or anything like that. I'm here asking a question, raising a point, discussing a concept, and that's the essence of this series, is to to raise those questions, those difficult questions that most people don't, that I don't see raised in the way I can raise them, which is the only way I know how, and that's this. So hopefully it matches someone else's thought process, as complicated as mine can be at times. But it really made me stop and think about what's going on here, because if I'm recognising these patterns, either the majority of shooters are just pressing the shutter and not thinking about what they're producing, or there's more at play and I may be falling victim to it, and I don't like that thought. I want creative freedom. I like to break these rules and I like to shoot for myself, and I don't like the thought that me having a Sony name on the front of my camera body is going to overwhelmingly influence my results. I don't want to have to combat it. I don't want to fight my manufacturer. I want to work with them, not defend myself against them. I hope this makes sense, but I'm not going to waffle on. I'm starting to lose my voice, and this light is just too good to have my echoes wandering through this amazing place. So I'm just going to mooch about a little bit more. And I'm going to say thank you very much for watching. Please take care of one another. And until next time, if you can't be good, just be careful. And I'll see you very soon. Take care. Bye for now.